My first question to you is, of course, we know that you are well vested in different areas of life when it comes to writing. But we are just going to be focusing on one of the books that you wrote on democracy, beyond democracy, that is. So my first basic question really is, what inspired you to write this book?
What inspired me the most when I wrote this book, it was about 20 years ago when I started doing that, was that I discovered that democracy at that time was not what people thought that it was. I discovered that democracy can be very oppressive, very dictatorial, very imperialistic, has caused a lot of suffering to the world, contrary to what we thought. And I still think that it is still, and after all these years of researching, democracy is not doing what it promises people to do. So, and then I come to realize that democracy is just an ideology, and there are some other political system which will emerge in the future. And I have been exploring that, and I discovered by myself that some new versions are going to come up, so democracy will not last.
What are these new versions that you say will be coming up?
I propose different versions of what I call post-democracy. And post-democracy is a new form of political system in the future. And just as in the older days, you have monarchy, you have dictatorship, you have totalitarian regime, and all of those also did not last for a long time. And democracy is no exception. The reason that we think that democracy is triumphant, especially at the end of the Cold War, you probably heard about the ideology about the end of ideas, the end of history, this kind of talk. Those are the propaganda after the end of the Cold War, because at the end of the Cold War, the U.S. triumphed over the Soviet Union. And at that time, people was very euphoria about this kind of the emergence of capitalism and democracy were like the end of history. They stand for the ultimate triumph and achievement of human history, especially the Western, the American version. And I came to challenge that. And I said that democracy and capitalism in that case could not last in the future.
Now, when you talk about the post-democracy, have you seen it being practiced already in some of the countries, in some of the states? I know you say this is what you see in the future, but do you see some signs of it already playing out?
Yes, already. It is emerging, but slowly. I propose more than 5 or 6 different versions of the future. Remember, democracy, post-democracy, they are not monolithic. There are different versions of that. Post-democracy is no exception. There will be different versions fighting against each other, competing against each other. And there are some signs that they have been emerging now, but they are slowly. One good example is another book related to that. That's called Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order, in which I predicted, and also another book, to the future of human civilization. I already predicted more than 25 years ago of the emergence of China as the dominant superpower, and India will be the next. And what China and India soon, by the way, are doing is very interesting in that they are, one way or the other, establishing a new form of political system on earth, which I call one of the versions of the emerging post-democratic system, but they are not there yet. They are still in the process of evolving. What the Chinese political system is doing now is in the process of great transformation that people do not know. They keep talking about Chinese dictatorship. And all this is a Western ignorance about non-Western political system. And I'm challenging that we need to wake up, especially in the West, about some great transformation going on in economic, political, cultural, and other spheres. That's why I am the author of 153 books so far. I propose more than 120 different visions of the future. And 2 of these is what I just mentioned, post-democracy, post-capitalism. And the Chinese example is just an example to answer your question about the emerging forms of post-democracy. Another one, which you did not mention, which is very relevant, is women's rights. And I do think that in the book, I also say that women will make a major contribution to the emergence of post-democracy, because what women are doing nowadays is to question some of the democratic political system that we have, especially in the West, has established so far. And that is also another indication. And the third example is what I call Islam. Now, something is very interesting about the Islamic countries that the Western world has been ignoring so far and portray them as terrorists and all that. But what they are doing is very interesting. I have been in more than 100 different countries by now on the global tour. And I can see that many other things that they are doing is establishing a new form of political system. And that is emerging, but they are still in the process of evolving. They are not the final product yet, and they too will have a major contribution to the emergence of post-democracy. All of this, by the way, is contrary to what we think in the West.
How ready would you say different states are around the world to embrace this post-democracy?
There's too many things going on. That's why in the book I have written 2 volumes and about 1,000 pages. And why does it take so much? If it is such a simple case, that I can just finish it in 1 page, right? In 2 pages. But it takes so many pages. And also I have written another book, The Future of Capitalism and Democracy, also about another 1,000 pages. Why does it take such a long time, or so lengthy to write up? Because they are so complicated. And one of the things that you just mentioned is something that I have talked about before too, is because democracy is creating too many problems nowadays. Democracy is not what we thought that it is. Look at, for example, about this, because I'm the U.S., I like to talk about the U.S. Look at the U.S. intervention in so many countries nowadays. Everywhere we are always advocating war. Every year, every few years, you will see the U.S. going to this country, bomb that country, interfere into the domestic affairs of another country, send some army in, and then support the opposition. And in the process, we have created so many problems in other countries. Look at Syria, look at Libya, for example, look at Iraq, Afghanistan, and on and on and on. I have been in so many countries around the world, and I see that time and again everywhere there are tremendous resentment against this kind of democratic involvement. So, and so many refugees. Look at nowadays, we talk about Brexit in the UK. In Germany, you have the problem about the refugee. Where are they from? From Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Syria, now from Yemen, now from Libya and all that. They just flee the country because the country had been bombed like to hell and there's civil war. Who supported all this? A major intervention here are from the Western powers. So this is very important. Democracy has caused so much problems, has created in many ways so much suffering in the world because of this.
But on that,
there's a backlash, by the way, and that's why Brexit is one good example. People just want to avoid all these immigrants coming to the UK. And the Germany too, now you have the rise of the far right, not just in Germany, but also in Poland, for example, in Hungary, in France too, in Italy, everywhere. Now you see it is a backlash of all that.
Yeah. On the point of the U.S. involvement, without dwelling so much on it, U.S. involvement or invasion into other countries under the pretext, so to say, of democracy. Is that really democracy in the real sense? And isn't it imposing their so-called democracy onto other countries by invading them? And
this is exactly one of the premises that I challenge the conventional wisdom about democracy, that democracy is good, non-democracy is bad. And just like there are some of the cliches saying that, let's say, among the feminists, men are bad, women are good. Whatever problem that you have, you just blame on the man. Man is always the problem which causing you all this problem. If you have a problem, just say it's sexist, it's patriarchal. And you just blame everything on men. The same thing in America, we also have blacks and white. Blacks like to blame white for all the problems that they have. Everything is always about racism. Now, the same thing about democracy. The problem with democracy is that every time when democracy does something, they always say they are doing the good thing, and other people are doing the bad thing. But if you look at that more carefully, it's just the reverse in many cases. Democracy has caused so much suffering around the world. And in fact, many of the colonial powers, many of them were democratic right at the beginning. In America, we have slavery, but it was justified even by the Supreme Court, by the way. Think about it, it's the judges, the legal court, which justified slavery more than 100 years ago. Think about it, it's democracy. So democracy, you have different definitions of democracy. One of them is about the notion of equality, freedom, and fraternity. That's the French definition, for example. Another one is the is a political system by the people, for the people, and of the people. And it's just different versions of the same way of looking at things. But if you think about this, it's the people who will decide, right? Not the king, the queen, the dictator. But time and again in democracy, it is the people who support the politician to invade another country, to support their own problem at home. Look at slavery in America. Look at the Japanese-American concentration camps during the war. Look at the involvement in foreign affairs, and look at the way that we treat the native Indians, the Eskimos, and all that. It's not just foreign, also domestic. It's not just in the U.S. You look at France, you look at Germany, you look at Italy, you look at the UK and how they treat their own people, the minority. Look at the Scandinavian countries even. Now, the Scandinavian used to have the ideology, the propaganda, that they are wonderful, they are good for democracy and all that. If you go to Scandinavia, I was there in all of those Scandinavian countries. Look at how they treat those people who are blacks. Those are Muslims. Those are Arabics. Many of those people often do not find jobs. And they often get a dirty job that the white Scandinavians do not do. Now, and there's a joke in Scandinavia that they have too many taxi drivers. They have PhDs. Now, this is just a joke. That's not true. But the joke is that the reason that is such a joke is that many people from Africa, from the Middle East, from South Asia and all that, they go to Scandinavia hoping for a better job and better life, and they end up finding that they are not quite accepted. They do not accept it as the equal citizen as the white Scandinavians. And of the job that they get, you look at the bus station, you go to the airport, you go to the supermarket, you go to all those shops, you go to the ghettos. What are those people? Many of them are not white Scandinavians. All those are black, Arabic, Muslim, and all those South Asian and all that. And all those jobs, the dirty job, who do them? It's those people who do the dirty job. Now, who are the CEO, the managers, the president, the chancellor, and all the top positions? Many of them are white Scandinavians. Now you talk the Scandinavian democracy is the ideal for the rest of the world. Come on, think about it. And by the way, I also said in my book, even post-democracy will not last forever either. It will evolve itself into different forms over time.
Let me thank you so much for your vast knowledge and the time you've made to conduct this interview. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for your invitation.